Ladies and gentlemen, the Global Alliance for ICT is a step towards the concept of global development. But I would like to remind you that partners in humanity, as against partners in development, Lester Pearson's coinage, was what led us in the 80s to call for a new international humanitarian order. Today, according to the Royal Society of Britain, which celebrates 350 years of its existence, we are facing multiple stress zones, from Morocco to South Asia, Africa, and parts of East Asia. Water stress, demographic stress, crop decline, hunger and coastal risk, not to mention, of course, the recurrence of war and its imminence in our immediate region. The cost of conflict in this region is already $12 trillion since Annapolis and Madrid. And given the hundreds of billions of dollar contracts to countries in the region for further supply of weapons, it appears to me that psychological reconstruction demands a reconstruction of the concept of common goods, which, as you know, since the creation of the Millennium Development Goals, has been the objective, global public goods. I would like to differ with this view. By definition, since 1981 at the General Assembly, I said that we are facing a conflict between fait accompli and the real objective of justice and dignity for us all. If you are to talk of providing public goods in a patronizing manner, what we are basically saying is that public goods are resources, services, or conditions provided openly by sovereign states to citizens within their borders. However, let me add that the idea of global common goods in terms of regions that have no definition of global commons, have no definition of a global compact as proposed in the past by Secretaries General, need a concept of covenant, which includes a global social contract. But to presume that global civil society exists, I think, is a gross travesty of the facts. If we are to address the content of human dignity, human rights, indigenous people's rights, numerous other social concerns, man against man, man against nature, then I think that our political legitimacy and our economic authority has to come from global commons organizations. And it is for that reason that I believe that our responsibility for the carrying capacity of a particular community or region has to depend on a third sphere definition, ad hominem participation of government, the corporate world, and of course the community at large. I don't want to go back to the Club of Rome statement in the early 70s, but let me remind you that Professor Meadows only 2 years ago reminded us that Mother Earth is effectively in stress. As I have mentioned earlier, 20% of the world's population, the rich minority, have contributed to this stress, and there are probably more Asian millionaires in the next decade than there are in the Western world. The realistic targets of the MDGs, the challenge there, I believe, is whether the public-private framework itself is the most functional approach. I think that we need a multilateral system, an intra-independent regional system, whereby each region is represented by an economic and social council that can cope with the spillovers which governments cannot cope with of the movement of goods, people, and services. Let me remind you that we are countries that host percentages of refugees which, at least in my country, would be the equivalent of 400 million refugees arriving on the United States shores tomorrow. I don't think that this definition of political economy is fully understood, and I would like to thank those who have referred to the failures of the MDGs, number 1 in poverty, employment, and hunger, number 2 in women's empowerment, and number 3 in environmental sustainability. I think that in December 2008, when we marked the 60th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it was clear that clean drinking water and clean air are not perceived as human rights. So I do believe that the time has come to focus on what has been described most recently as a synthesis in terms of regional cooperation, that is to say, achieving environmental costs through internalization of these costs, establishing the rules and guidelines for the use and management of common resources, creating incentives for sustainable development, setting rents or surcharges on the use of common resources, and developing economic instruments, developing a route of ideas, if you will. And I thank the Institute for Planetary Synthesis, an NGO in consultative status with ECOSOC, for bringing these structural changes to our attention. I would also like to thank all those who have pointed out, such as Loretta Napoleoni, the bestseller author of Terror Incorporated and Insurgent Iraq, at the meeting chaired recently at the Club of Madrid, where she brought heads of state from around the world to create a new strategy for combating the financing of terror networks. Let me remind you that the black economy may well be winning if we continue to fail in our regional responsibilities. Let us think globally and act regionally in the interests of human dignity. Thank you.